Hi, how you doing? I'm Meloncelli, and I'm going to share with you today how to use the 80-20 principle to get yourself into flow. I was asked this question by one of my students. Wilson, what 20% do I focus on to get that 80% return? So this is what I said to him. Okay, before I tell you what I said to him, I need to go through this process here. This is the 4 cycles of flow, and this is quite commonly known. So what you have before you get yourself into flow is you'll go through some common stages. So there's a struggle phase, and that generally is where you are sort of trying to find yourself in the task that you're undertaking. That's where you have a little bit of tension and frustration as you're perhaps learning something new, or you are warming yourself up but you can't really find your flow. This is the struggle phase, which is really common for people to get stuck in and get into sort of a loop with that. And how they break free from that tension, that frustration that's built up, is they almost begin to tune into their breathing, and they go through a process called the release stage. And when they tune into their breathing, they stimulate the sort of sympathetic and parasympathetic coherence. And when they do that, they release nitric oxide into your system. And nitric oxide is a vasodilator, so it opens up the blood vessels and creates flow of oxygen and blood throughout your system. So this release phase generally then triggers people into the flow state. So when they're in flow, the task that they're doing holds them in there. And the only way they come out of it is if they analyse, am I in flow? Oh shit, I'm in flow, and then they come out of it. If they're staying that wave and they ride the wave of flow, what will happen is at the end they'll come into the recovery stage, and that's where they come out of flow, if you like. Okay? So what normally happens here is when you go through that recovery stage, you're in flow, your body is in a sort of productive, stressful state. Your body's releasing powerful neurotransmitters and hormones. You feel awesome at the time when you're in that flow state, but it does have a sort of productive stress response in there, and all stress has to be digested, has to be recovered from. But what happens, because this is so damn good, is people just quickly go back into getting into this stage here. But what happens is that they take on fatigue, tension and excess cortisol, they take that with them. So this here, which they should be digesting in the recovery stage, so that is eliminated because they're effectively recovering, they come over here, okay? So then they restart their day, restart their task in the struggle, okay? And they go through that process again. What happens is that struggle gets more into a chronic struggle, and it becomes more and more challenging to release and get yourself into flow. And that cycle there, what happens is that people end up finding excuses for themselves. They end up having to sort of fight through the tension, fight through the struggle. Or they get to the point where they think, you know, I just can't do this anymore. It's too hard for me to do. So they find excuses to stop themselves going in and being productive and being in the flow state. So they find that way out, if you want. It's too hard, can't do it, not going to do it. But the key is to turn this struggle into priming yourself. When you prime yourself to get into flow, you're always in that sweet spot. You're in that optimal state to get yourself put into flow. So how do you prime yourself? You focus on the recovery. When you focus on the recovery, you rub out the tension, the excess cortisol, the fatigue, the anxiety, the depression. You manage your recovery, you prime yourself to get into flow. So, you want to focus your 20% on recovery. You focus on the recovery and you prime yourself to get into flow. So, this is how you use the 80-20 principle to get yourself into flow. But before you go, I want to share one more bit of information for you. How to really manage that and how to work with that is to start monitoring and tracking your heart rate variability. Heart rate variability will make priming a lot easier for you to do. Okay? Thanks very much for listening, and stay tuned for some more videos all related to this. Ciao.